The challenge is that you, the HR leader, are at the center of that hurricane. And the eye of that hurricane is not calm.
I did not know that this was such a, I hate to say it, normal part of HR until I was in HR and talking to other HR people.
Nobody wins litigation. The only people that win in litigation are lawyers who get paid to litigate.
Welcome to Primal HR. Real people, real talk, real HR. The human side of work from the people who live it every day. Here are your hosts, longtime HR leader Terry Smith and People First strategist Leslie Lulham.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of the Primal HR Podcast. And we have a topic of conversation for you today that impacts a lot of people and companies in the HR realm, and that is litigation. Dun, dun, dun.
Yes, litigation. Hi, everybody. This is Terry, here with my fantastic co-host, Leslie, and we are talking about litigation because as HR leaders, we find ourselves sometimes facing litigation. When you think about corporate litigation, you think about a lot of things. You think about patents and copyrights and things of that nature, people where organizations on the whole get sued for those kinds of issues. And what a lot of people hear about, but maybe don't really stop and think about, is the notion that there are a lot of lawsuits that occur that are very directly oriented around human resources activities, things like harassment, discrimination, FMLA, things that are garish headlines, if you will. They're exciting because they talk about things like people being harassed and being pushed on and so forth. But the challenge is that you, the HR leader, are at the center of that hurricane, and that the eye of that hurricane is not calm. And what I mean by that simply is that there are situations where an employee may bring a lawsuit against an organization for things like harassment or discrimination or wage discrimination or any of a number of topics related specific to them, in which you as the HR leader would be considered complicit. And so guess what? You as the HR leader, whether you are involved in the situation or not, can be named in that lawsuit. And that's a critical thing. A lot of people say, well, gee, so what? Well, a lawsuit, your name in a lawsuit can put you in a position of having your credit rating challenged, having it being reduced. You may find yourself in situations where big purchases are no longer available because you've been sued, and it can really do a lot of damage to you as an individual. And you're also, as a matter of public record, because you're named in a lawsuit that involves a particular activity, that is now something that other people, other organizations, other lawyers can see, right? And so that puts you in a position of visibility that I assure you, you don't want to have. So litigation, being named in a litigation situation in a lawsuit is very, very difficult, very, very challenging for HR leaders. And it's, as HR leaders, it's something that we simply have to bear. Now, in the vast majority of cases, if a company gets sued for a particular action, such as, say, wage discrimination, the corporate attorneys, if you have a corporate attorney, will essentially say to the HR leader, we have your back, okay? We will cover you as part of the overall litigation, and so that when we settle this, we settle it in such a way so that you are no longer exposed or liable for anything, that we'll make sure that the deal that we arrive at will get you out of that jam. But that could take years. It could literally take years. And so even though you have that support of a legal framework, you still are going to be dealing with this for a long time to come. So if for no other reason than simply because you want to stay clear of that kind of thing, it's very important that you're doing your job so that people aren't encouraged by your actions or inactions to pursue legal recourse, so that you don't have to wind up in that swamp. But that's, a purely selfish reason for doing what's right, and that is doing your job as an HR leader.
Exactly. As you were saying this, I was like, That's why we have HR at companies, to make sure the laws are being followed, to make sure there isn't discrimination happening. Now, it still happens,
of
right?
course.
And unfortunately, we can't catch everything. We can't have eyes everywhere, nor would we really want to. Come on, let's be honest. But I did not know that this was such a, I hate to say it, normal part of HR until I was in HR and talking to other HR people, and they're like, oh yeah, like, got sued again. Ha ha. And I'm like, wait, hold on. This is normal? You know, and so for anyone starting out in HR, yes, it is normal. If your company is abiding by the law and not doing really terrible things, you're probably going to be fine. But we live in a day and age where people are very litigious. And in fact, between 2004 and 2014, FLSA lawsuits in the U.S. more than doubled. They went from 3,600 in 2004 to 8,100 in 2014. Where are we at today? We're seeing in the vicinity, I've seen a few reports that show differing data. So some will say 8,000 to 9,000 we're seeing, and some will say 6,000. So the surge of doubling is over, but it has stayed at a relatively high rate. That's fluctuating by a couple of percentage points, of course. So it is something that happens.
Yes, unfortunately, that's true. And that's, FLSA covers a lot of ground, right? But it doesn't cover all of the potential lawsuit categories within sort of the HR space. And you're right, we are a very litigious society, especially given that the last data point that I read was that at the turn of the century, 1 out of every 200 people had a law degree in America.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was a fact.
That's an interesting stat.
And you can probably imagine it's gone up. It's probably, who knows, 1 in 175, who knows. But the interesting thing about that is that it's sort of a chicken and egg thing. If you have more lawyers chasing money than you had, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, guess what? There's going to be more sort of opportunity for things to just bubble up. I had a situation with a company where I had a subsidiary. We had a subsidiary of geographically different location than the one I worked in. But I got sent into that warehouse because there were all kinds of crazy things going on, and there was actually a lawsuit in progress. And so not only in progress, but the plaintiff, who had taken time off of work, now had returned to work, and it had become a potentially very volatile situation. So I was basically tasked with going in, being the HR leader, making things smooth out. And it was a very interesting challenge. We did smooth things out, and we did settle the lawsuit ultimately. And because there was that energy already in the shop, there was an added level of tension around legal action. There were people who were looking for things to sue the company for, right? I literally had an employee at one point who said, gee, maybe I should just sue somebody. And I said,
wow.
Well, maybe you should, because that's the only way you're going to get any kind of sense of relief. He never did. But, but the point was that there was this energy in the shop around litigation, and everybody was being very careful, and everybody was very tense. And so part of my job was to try and bring the temperature down.
Listen, nobody wants to go to court.
No.
The company doesn't. Maybe the person does if they want to really get in front of a jury, but I would say, and you tell me if I'm wrong because you've experienced this more times, they want to settle outside of court. They want they just want it to go away. And I mean, if you look at separations as any indication, right? We have separation agreements. There are other agreements sent out to settlements ahead of separate, just to avoid it. Nobody wants to be sitting in court, but some people do, I guess.
Well, I think there's a percentage of people that not so much that they want to sit in court and go through the exercise and go through discovery and, all that stuff, but they want to get their ounce of flesh, if you will. They are convinced, rightly or wrongly, that they've been wronged and that they want to get something out of it. And there is that percentage of the population. You can't deny that. And so those are always folks that are looking for a way. I can tell several amusing stories about people who would misbehave on purpose and make it look like it was accidental. And so
oh, my gosh.
Yes, incredible. But the point is that by and large, you're right. People really don't want to go through the exercise. It's long, it's arduous, it's expensive, and
stressful.
And ultimately, nobody really wins. That's, if we walk away with nothing else from this particular episode today, litigation, nobody wins.
Nobody, I like it.
And so my point, though, is let's do our jobs. Let's do our jobs as HR leaders. Let's do our jobs as managers. Let's be thoughtful about, coming back to the episode that we had just a while ago, episode 5, around, training managers to be more effective as leaders of people so that when situations occur, that they are better equipped to handle them and better equipped to address them and better equipped to know when to be solo and when to go to the HR team for help, and on and on and on, so that you mitigate the potential for litigation.
Right. And if you are an HR person, I am going to be repeating something you have probably said a million times. But if you are not in HR, if you're a manager, hey, if you work with people, you need to be documenting. Document everything. Because you never know when something's going to come up. I've been in situations where I had to go look at documentation that I had collected from years ago. I'm a copious note taker, and I can tell you I was so glad that I had reference material when I was asked a very specific question about a very specific thing. When I'm working with brand new managers for the first time, I say, step 1, make a document and start recording all of your one-on-one notes. If you want to take it one step further, send those emails summarizing what you talked about in your one-on-ones and create a paper trail for yourself, because the last thing you want to happen is you get in a sticky situation, however long down the road, and you can't remember exactly what happened. And so if the person says something that's either true or not true, it's hard for you to refute it. It becomes a he said, she said.
Correct.
Document everything.
That's great advice, and that's the advice that I'm sure the vast majority of managers who are listening to us or who know people who are listening and what have you, you hate hearing it. I don't have time to document. I don't have time to write all this stuff down. I don't have time. It's a pain in the neck to do it. Well, yeah, I agree. It's a pain in the neck to do it. It does take time. It is so worth that time.
Do it anyways.
Do it anyway, because Leslie's absolutely right. It becomes a he said, she said, and without documentation, you're nowhere. And really, think of it as making it part of your leadership process, making it part of your management toolkit, that you've set up a system where you document your one-on-one meetings with people. You document when you have impromptu meetings with people. You just go and write it down, or drop it into a Word document or what have you. But you really can only benefit from the time and energy it takes to do that work, I assure you.
Absolutely. That just made me think of when you're putting someone on a PIP. For those who don't know what a PIP is, it's a performance improvement plan. It's usually 30, 60, 90 days. The way I've implemented them in the past is you want to kind of start to see the beginnings of a trend of an issue, and then you can say, hey, this has been an issue. This is how we're going to fix it. When you take those notes from your one-on-ones, sorry, Terry, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. I could be like, hey, Terry, on April 1st, we talked about the fact that you were having trouble hitting these numbers. And then in our next one-on-one on April 15th, your numbers were still below. You can go back to that date and remind that person of what you said.
Yeah.
And because the numbers haven't improved, we're putting you on a PIP. Right? And so that's the PIP version of documentation, but it applies to anything litigious. It applies to everything in HR and management world.
We could probably do a whole episode just on PIPs.
We should do that.
I'm just thinking.
I'm going to add that to the list.
All right. Because, there's a strong feeling among people that I've worked with over the years, that, we get why PIPs work, but there's also the argument that PIP isn't just an opportunity to improve. The PIP is the last step before they kick you out the door.
That's what everyone thinks.
And that is not necessarily true, and I would like to explode that myth. So let's do that sometime.
Let's do it.
Final thoughts on this. If you're a manager in HR, a leader in HR, if you're a line manager, supervisor, VP, whatever, nobody wins litigation. The only people that win in litigation are lawyers who get paid to litigate. They walk home with a big check. No one else wins. So do your jobs, be effective. Let's talk about how we can help you with that. Check us out.
Have you got a spicy take or a burning question? Drop it in our inbox. hello@primalhrpodcast.com.
Coming up next on Primal HR Podcast is our discussion of onboarding, what good onboarding is, what it is not, why it's important, and why every organization should put every effort into doing good onboarding.
Love it or hate it, it's a critical part of the employee experience and impacts not just how they start with your company, but their retention overall. Terry and I are going to unpack that, so stay tuned.
You've been listening to Primal HR. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Join the conversation on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Primal HR Podcast. Show notes and more at primalhrpodcast.com. Got a topic or want to join us on the show? Reach out. Our email is hello@primalhrpodcast.com. We'll see you next time.